Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Mahamudra for the People. Um, this happens to be our this 43rd session, and it's really nice to be here with all of you. Um, and I think we will be able to complete this text today, which is exciting. And I'm just, yeah. So we'll finish this today, which is exciting. And before we go any further, though, I want to check in. Is it noisy on my end of things? Just someone let me know if there's like atmospheric noise. Do I sound okay? If someone could just let me know if I sound okay, that would be helpful. Okay. There's a little bit of noise. Okay. Yeah, there's a little bit of construction where I am. But okay, if it's not unbearable, um, audible but not unbearable. Okay, I will try and speak up. I mumble a bit. So, okay, cool. Uh, so let's take a moment to just kind of settle into being here. Um, Taking a moment to settle directly into this moment and to really, I guess you could say, remember that our practice is not only really serious, but also very impactful. And that, there may be ways where we have either been made to feel smaller than we are as practitioners, be specifically belittled, either by teachers in the past or even the way systems tend to explain meditation and what we're capable of realizing. So let's move into this space with the full recognition that we're able to actually realize awakening in this lifetime, because that's true. Right? And because that's true, engaging in practice becomes really important. And even though engaging in practice is very important, being relaxed about that is even more important than being tight. Right? And when we practice, we often think that we need to practice hard, and we need to, get a butt full of calluses because, that's what the great practitioners of the past have done, and some have practiced that way, but not everybody has. And I'm going to kind of challenge everybody to try and be as spacious and free and open and relaxed as possible. In this relaxation piece is a really fundamental part of Mahamudra practice in general. Practice only goes so far if we're going to be really hard on ourselves, or if we're going to even conceptually come up with these ideas that if I'm not putting a lot of time and energy into this, then I'm not going to produce results. And the kind of irony about that way of thinking is it can feel very good. It can allow us to feel like our diligence is being rewarded. And I tend to feel like that thinking really is a stain from kind of a capitalist kind of conceptual system that just kind of has a slight veil, sometimes not so slight, very strong veil at times, that impacts the way we relate to practice. So that's something to keep in mind. Right? We don't have to kill ourselves to get enlightened. We can actually kind of relax into things, and awakening begins. So if we could just start off this session with that specifically in mind, I think that would be quite helpful. And then I would like to move into how funny. I used all sorts of bookmarks, and I don't know which one is the right one. Let's move into a little bit of meditation. So we'll sit for about 10 minutes. And again, as we've done up until this point, use whatever feels comfortable to you as an anchor. So again, that could be your breath. Bring awareness to every inhalation and exhalation that arises. You can use a physical object within your visual field. So it could be a statue, it could be a tanka, it could be a pebble, it could be a piece of lint. Or you can use a visualized object. So, sometimes classically they'll say a little Buddha in the crown of your head, or a tigle right between your brow, or a tigle down in your belly. And of course you can use the experience of mind itself as the anchor. So allowing awareness of what is arising in mind experience to be the thing that you gently focus your awareness on. So whichever one feels comfortable, and these are not also in like a logical progression of base to awakened. Right? It's actually just an example of how you can use physical body, visible objects, imagined objects, and mind itself as a way of settling into the experience of mind. So whichever one feels good is what you should rely on. We'll sit for about 10 minutes. Okay. Just slowly bring yourself back to this moment, to us here. Okay, so let's check in and notice how that feels. Okay, so I am slightly confused about where I left off, so I'm going to ask somebody to confirm with me whether or not we okay. No, I think we... Well, so I'm going to do the final instruction, which is called pointing out the still mind and the moving mind as the same or different. And I do think I started that. And then the very end is the conclusion of the practice, which has a little bit of kind of practical advice on how things unfold. So there may be a little bit of repetition, but that might not be a bad thing. Like it'll definitely be a good way for you all to kind of see whether or not I'm full of it. If I start teaching things totally differently than I had before. So for those who are new, this text is called Pointing Out the Dharmakaya, and it's a Mahamudra text by Wangchu Dorje, who is the ninth Karmapa. And he wrote three very important Mahamudra texts for the Karmakagya tradition. This is the shortest one. And very briefly put, the text is broken into two sections, one on shamatha and one on vipassana. And while I've been teaching these more or less, on a weekly basis, except for the period of time where I was in retreat, the text is not necessarily to be engaged in this way, where on one week you do one instruction, the next week you do the next instruction. In reality, the way the text should be practiced is that as we move kind of naturally and organically through our practice, achieving stabilization in the different points, then we move on to the next thing, right? So I just want to be a little clear about that. The moving on to the next point is really rooted in some semblance of stability in the previous point. So if you find yourself in especially this last instruction that it sounds great but it seems unapproachable, then it would make sense to kind of go back a little bit to the place that feels comfortable, and then we can go from there. So with this instruction, I'm just going to go over it. I may be repeating myself, but I just want to make sure everything's clear. So this is called pointing out the still mind and the moving mind is the same or different. So allow yourself to sit as comfortably as you can, and just allow the sound to hit your ear and experience to happen. And so Karmapa says that by looking at both the still mind and the moving mind, as we have in the previous instructions, from both of these two, thought is understood to be meditation. The still mind and the moving mind are known to be nothing but the same. Their way of arising is that they alternate. At the time of stillness, there is no movement. At the time of movement, there is no At the time of movement, there is no stillness, and at the time of stillness, there is no movement. Nevertheless, it is a single mind doing this. The nature of these two is nothing other than naked luminosity emptiness. is not that one gathers in thoughts and then sees them as naked luminosity, emptiness, but it is when one realizes immediately upon their arising that thoughts are naked luminosity, emptiness, that one knows the natural state of mind. This is called the falling apart of the division between stillness and movement. Mind may be still, luminous and steady and non-thought, or there may be movement of thoughts, but the essence of these thoughts is nothing other than naked luminosity, emptiness. So I'll just pause here. So I did go through this instruction last time, but I will kind of just reiterate, especially the beauty in this, right? One of the things that's being pointed out here is the way that we preference, out of ignorance, the experience of stillness, right? So a mind that is still, stable, what often comes with the experience of stillness is this kind of sense of spaciousness or vastness. We preference that over the mind that's moving, right? Thought activity. When I was meditating in the beginning, I was thinking, I used to be a contractor, and I can hear that this is a tile saw. And then I just kind of thought that this is almost like instant karma for all the times I cut tiles outside of people's homes, making noise for folks, probably disturbing them. So that's an example of moving mind, right? That thought activity just comes, right? And one of the most amazing things about life is that we think, right? So the thinking itself is not the problem, right? So if we can move away from trying to force ourselves to be still, right? That's not what Mahamudra is about, right? Mahamudra is about understanding that there's essentially no difference between the mind of thought activity and the mind of stillness. That these are exactly the same thing. And that this particular point of recognizing this as being called the falling apart of the division between stillness and movement is really the eradication of any kind of division between those preferences. Right? So mind may be still, luminous and steady and non-thought, or there may be movement of thoughts, but the essence of these thoughts is nothing other than the same essence of the stillness, which is luminosity, emptiness. Right? And then luminosity, emptiness becomes this kind of, thing where we're like, what is that? It sounds nice, luminosity, emptiness. And I think maybe the best, or a good equivalent would be, the luminosity refers to the brilliance, right? That the fact that the potential for things to arise, right? The potential for experience, and the rich, variegated nature of experience, right? So what we see visually, what we experience emotionally, mentally, what we feel in terms of temperature, what we taste, what we smell, all of our senses, right? The way everything comes in this rich and beautiful Technicolor way. It can be overwhelming sometimes, it could be dull, it might not be the kind of things we want, right? But all of that is the luminosity, right? It's this kind of like, active birthing, so to speak, of experience. And then the emptiness is really, it's not this kind of negative, voidness, even though, it periodically has been translated as a voidness. It is that everything essentially has the same nature, right? That there's no specific inherent qualities that differentiate anything necessarily from anything else. Right, so we might think I need everything to be peaceful and Om Shanti, and preference that over, some kind of crazy experience. And the truth is that ultimately they are the same, right? And this Mahamudra practice is this allowance of things to come into a container or an experience that is so vast that it can hold everything equally. If that makes sense. And then I also want to remind everyone that they can ask questions by asking a question in the Ask a Question tab or in the text box. So Karmapa goes on to say that now when you realize that, like water and waves, all objects and appearances actually do not exist as anything other than the magical tricks of mind. The pointing out that all appearances are mind has been recognized. The nature of that mind, through investigating its going, abiding, and arising, is shown not to exist anywhere. When you realize that, like a horse or an elephant in a dream, that does not actually exist, the pointing out of that mind is empty and has been recognized. And so, here, like water and waves, have the same nature. All objects and appearances essentially have the same nature as well, ultimately. And so the distinction between all of these things, the distinction between, this thing that I want and this thing that I don't want, this thing that I like and this thing that I don't like, this thing that smells great, this thing that smells terrible, this thing that tastes great, this thing that tastes terrible, this thing that makes me feel good, this thing that makes me feel terrible. Ultimately, these are all the same, right? Now, of course, our kind of immediate reaction to these things could be a little bit more complicated, right? And we'll find ourselves wanting one kind of experience over another. But again, this practice really is it's about getting as free as possible through learning to be patient and open and available to everything that's happening. And through investigating how it arises, right? So arises, abides, and continues to arise. So, going, abiding, and arising is kind of like a dialectic, right? Thought activity arises, there can be reaction leading to the next thought activity, right? Or experience. So, sensation arises, reaction occurs, leading to new sensation, leading to new reaction, on and on and on and on and on. Right? And so when we're able to kind of recognize not only this process, but the fact that all of what arises ultimately free of any particular characteristic, right? That we are the ones who kind of in our place of being triggered or reactive tend to assign the characteristics to things. When we're able to recognize, our part in how we characterize or judge or create the tenor or the flavor or the value around what's happening, then we begin to realize that all of these things really are the same, and this is how the pointing out of that mind is empty arises. And so Karmapa goes on to say that within emptiness and brilliant luminosity, whatever arises dawns as unceasing great bliss and spontaneous presence in all its variety, like the moon reflected in water. When you realize that, the pointing out that emptiness is spontaneous presence has been recognized. And so, this emptiness and brilliant luminosity, right? Everything that's arising and everything that dawns as a ceasing play of great bliss and spontaneous presence in all its variety, like the moon reflected in water. So this unceasing activity. Now, the amazing thing about experience, and so this is, I'm talking about just moving through space, right? Walking down the street, sitting on a bench in the park, or laying in the grass in the park. All that's occurring is unceasing activity, right? There's sensation, there's visual consciousness, there's sound, there's relationship to time. It's Friday. What are we doing on the weekends? All of this stuff comes, and it's unceasing. Right? It's amazing. And when we're able to occupy, an experience of kind of vast open awareness, then everything can come and it becomes an experience of great bliss. The spontaneous, unceasing presence becomes something that is amazing to watch, amazing to behold, amazing to actually even quote unquote play in. Especially when we're able to kind of recognize it that way. And of course, the metaphor like a moon reflected in water is pointed out. So this is the same text I've been teaching called the Pointing Out the Dharmakaya by Mahamudra, the ninth Karmapa. So Payne says, Karmapa, even calling it mind, is such an act of compassion. He could have called it anything, but he knew we wouldn't understand if he called it cottage cheese. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know that he called it mind. It was translated as mind. I think, the thing is, English is kind of a strange, very limited language for a lot of this stuff. And language isn't really good to begin with in describing these experiences. And while we can, get heavily into linguistics, the words themselves just don't capture the experience, right? And so this is really kind of where too much kind of reading and too much study is not the equivalent to practice, because you can read, you can study, and we become very good at kind of parroting or just repeating the words, the terms, etc., and we're not necessarily letting this dawn within our own experience. And we can take this completely out of the context of meditation and just even like conceive of the word love, right? Like the word love and the experience of love. They are two fundamentally different things, right? The descriptor, the term love, gets at this, potentially shared experience, but how love is experienced by everybody here. So by Lorena, by Payne, by Melissa, by George and Sam and Max and Sarah, and the other Sarah, and Ari, and Casey, and Margaret, and Scott, and Susanna, and everybody else. Like, love is going to be experienced differently. Love arises differently. Love causes, different kinds of, like subsidiary experiences, right? And so this is, just an example of how using the term mind, like, what does that really mean, right? So it's complex. It's not to say the words don't matter. They do to some extent, but words get in the way. So yeah, and then the Karmapa goes on to say, and I might do this part a little bit. Oh yeah, Sarah asks, would you speak to Mahamudra practice in relation to physical pain? The vastness and beauty in the contemplative appearance makes more sense when there's less noise in your physical body. When I'm in pain, experience feels constricted. Yes, so there is this kind of correlation to some extent between physical sensation and especially things like pain, exhaustion, the way anxiety manifests in our body, right? Even though anxiety is like, it can be triggered two ways, right? It can be triggered from body, it can be triggered from, mental experiences or emotional experiences. So in those places of tightness, I think that the ultimate kind of quote unquote antidote in bringing Mahamudra to these experiences, pain, anxiety, discomfort, exhaustion, is to try and allow ourselves and we've even used the language giving ourselves permission to relax as much as we can. And so that's relax the mind, relax the body, relax the, like in the retreat that I did, earlier, I guess a couple months ago, started a couple months ago, there was a lot of just relaxing into the moment, which took the form of laying down. And so, this kind of gets back to the point right before we started, the meditation, where it can be very helpful to kind of, take intensity off the table, especially with respect to practices like Mahamudra and Hatha Yoga. This constriction. So, like, we can have an experience of constriction even just in sitting practice, where we're like, am I full of it? Am I directly experiencing this, or am I just lazy and kind of, letting my mind get carried away, right? And so, when that arises, it becomes important for us to begin to understand for ourselves how it is that we loosen that, right? And so there are actually physical yogas to help us, from the Vajrayana tradition. So there's breathing exercises, there's a lot of different things. There's Nejang yoga, there's Chokur, which is kind of more aimed at kind of, they're both aimed at kind of pacifying and balancing the different energies in the body. And the interesting kind of thing about it is that is kind of twofold. Like, by manipulating the energies and winds in the body, then one is able to kind of, generate a particular kind of experience. But then also you can kind of cut it from the other side. When we're able to rest in the nature of mind, the energies in the body naturally balance as well. Right? So, as Lorena points out, it could be movement, it could be deep breathing, it can be many, many different things. It could be taking a nap, getting sleep. I typically probably only sleep about 5 hours a night, sometimes a little more. But by a Friday, like, I'm zonked, right? And so I could want to perform some kind of Dharma activity and be really tired, but sometimes I'll choose to take a nap instead. Because then when I move into the next activity, then I'm able to move into it in the way that I want, rather than be tired and not focused. And then, and then there's this kind of like natural second guessing of oneself when we feel like we're showing up in that particular way, where we're experiencing pain or exhaustion, etc. Listening to the body is important, and then also listening to how we think about our body, how we think about pain, how we think about, if we have a chronic pain experience, then how can we address the pain in a way where we are not feeling like we are less of a meditator, because perhaps the position we're taking might not be, the kind you see a statue take, or painted in tankas, or even described. And a good, kind of defense of this particular point is I've read commentaries, somewhat recent commentaries on Tibetan physical yogas, where it's been pointed out that a lot of, not everybody has the same shaped body. So we can't always put our bodies into the same position. And there's this relative kind of, very general difference in length of torso between people from Asia and people from Europe. And this teacher was saying, if you can't do the proper asana because of the length of your torso, don't make a big deal out of it. Everything's, just do what you can do, and that's okay. We don't need to make such a big deal of reading everything super literally, And there's a way that we can, really kind of like put ourselves down when it seems like we're not doing things correctly. So, just go with what feels best. So Karmapa continues by saying that, like the unloosening of a knot in a snake, spontaneous presence itself, not departing from luminosity, insight, emptiness, spontaneous presence, simplicity, unchangedness, and great bliss, is liberated immediately upon arising. When you gain certainty in that, pointing out that spontaneous presence is self-liberated has been recognized. And so, this is, and I said this in the last teaching, there's this kind of metaphor of putting a snake in a knot and it having the ability to kind of, untie itself. So here what he's saying is, like the loosening of a knot in a snake, which happens automatically, right? Or is a self-unknotted, self-liberated. Spontaneous presence itself, not departing from luminosity, insight, emptiness, spontaneous presence, simplicity, unchangingness, and great bliss, is liberated immediately upon arising. Right? So spontaneous presence, everything that happens, right? Like I'm in like my shrine room, and so there's all this Dharma stuff around, right? And I see it, I take it in, I experience different things. Right? Everything that I experience in the moment, the vividness, the immediacy, the inspiration, all is self-liberated. The moment, visual consciousness hits my eyes, the moment sound hits my ear, the moment smell hits my nose, temperature, is sensed by the skin, it's all self-liberated. It arises, and the self-liberated, it's not like it's perfect bliss, right? And so kind of going back to this piece about pain, pain happens, right? There's an alertness, there's an experience of it, right? There's a sharpness maybe, right? But there's also this characteristic of the experience being allowed to happen and happening in a way that's complete and does not need modification, right? Does not need to be explained away, does not need commentary. And this is actually a really important point around how Mahamudra, to some extent, begins to transcend Tantra, because Tantra is still a system, and Mahamudra is moving out of that system. It's moving out of descriptors. It's moving out of words. It's moving out of symbols. It's moving into just everything happening freely, chaotically, in the sense that there's no time to categorize. There's no need to categorize. There's no need to justify. There's no need to judge. There's no need to see if what you're doing is right or wrong. It's not because you don't care about right or wrong. It's because everything that happens. So this mind that is to be pointed out, just this ordinary mind that is keenly aware of one's train of rambling thoughts, like me rambling right now, is great bliss, the union of luminosity and emptiness, known as the emptiness endowed with all the supreme aspects, or Mahamudra. Recognizing that is called realizing Mahamudra. There's nothing whatsoever to meditate upon, not wandering even for an instant. Let insight be sharp and rest in its natural state. So, ultimately, this union of luminosity and emptiness, this experience of everything as it's happening directly, right? There's no wasted energy on judging. No wasted energy in validating. No wasted energy in philosophy. No wasted energy in ethics. No wasted energy in anything. Just direct experience. Free. Like, what does it mean to be free of everything? Yes, Lorena, it's my jam too. um, yeah. I like to make fun of pain's name. I mean, not make fun of, but when there's pain and we're talking about physical pain. So forgive me for, poking him and talking about pain. So I just want to say this one comment about yes, yeah. So Sarah's point is good. About this is why modifications are so important for any movement practice to be good and feel good for all bodies. And so it's the bodies and it's also the mind. My kind of like best Dharma brother friend is an incredible tennis athlete and, just much better than me with physical fitness, and cannot sit even kind of like, half lotus style. And, at first, I think there was probably some kind of pressure that he felt that he put on himself and maybe felt was being projected onto him, when we were in Asia, where, everybody is basically judged very similar to the way we're judged here, like automatically, right? And so it's like, well, why is that guy sitting all weird? Surely he's not a good practitioner. And it's just that his body just is the way that it is. Who cares, right? It's that stuff is not really that important, It's not worth, going down the rabbit hole of trying to be perfect in your physicality. It's not worth going down the rabbit hole of trying to please others or to look good. Believe me, I don't look good, and it's a whatever. Like, you just, on one level, there's kind of like a maturity that happens with practice where we begin to kind of, recognize that I can only do what I can do, and then who cares, what other people think. Feeling good is good. Believe me, there's enough to beat ourselves up about on a daily basis. The last thing we need is to do that within the realm of practice. So, moving on, and so actually to this point, Karmapa says, not creating any hope or fear whatsoever, hoping for the best and fearing the worst, and resting loose and relaxed in the very nature of ordinary mind, just at the moment you see Mahamudra, the union of bliss and emptiness, like the center of the clear, cloudless sky. Now the goal has been accomplished. Shamatha and Vipassana have been unified, experience and realization perfected, and you have entered the path of liberation. Right? So this hope and fear, this longing, this anxiety about, I'm not doing it right, or how come Karmapa doesn't write about pain, or how come, they don't write about, a particular physical condition I might have. And I can't answer those questions. But this point about not creating hope or fear really has a lot to do about just letting go of, this habit of needing everything to be perfect, right? And, the real irony about that for us is that, we only know like this much of the whole tradition, and we still freak out about being perfect, right? So we should just let it go. We should, enjoy hybridity. We should enjoy who we are, how we were born, how we speak, all of these things. You know? So, yeah. Feeling bad is okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, feeling bad, like, let's see. Feeling everything is okay. There's no thing that's not okay. You know, that's what, you know. I think that I do think that you know in America, like there is this like weird self-help obsession and kind of wellness craze where everything has to be good and supportive and etc. like all the time, and that sets us up to think that those things are better than the experience of depression and sadness. Right? If depression and sadness is what comes up, then that's what's experienced. If anger and pain is what's experienced, then it's anger and pain. If it's loss and brokenness, then what's experienced in that moment is loss and brokenness. And we don't need to transform. And this is where, like, again, Mahamudra is much more radical than Tantra, because Tantra is still rooted in this ethos of transformation. And so I've kind of brought this up before, like Gampopa in his Precious Garland of the Supreme Path talks about these three different ways of addressing difficulties that we experience on the path, and they are avoidance, transformation, and resting in them. Right? And so avoidance is, to avoid feeling crappy. Sometimes we can do that, but often we can't, right? And so we could transform that feeling crappiness into, visualizing ourselves as the Bodhisattva of compassion, Chinrezi. His white forearms, recite his mantra, or it could be Tara, recite her mantra, right? And then we're beginning to kind of transform our experience. That's good, right? But there's still this like subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, imprint of a desired outcome different than what I'm experiencing in this moment. Mahamudra and Dzogchen are rooted in directly experiencing what's happening and recognizing everything that's happening instantaneously, resting into the spaciousness that arises. So the recognition of everything that's happening is recognizing absence of attachment, absence of aversion, absence of ignorance or delusion. So like it's not that we have to like if we step in dog shit, it's not that we have to like freak out and like, wash our shoe and then put perfume on the shoe, right? Which is beginning to transform and mask everything, right? Like we just step in shit and then we're like, all right, I just stepped in shit. I need to do whatever I need to do. I'm about to get in the car. I gotta scrape the shit off my shoe before I get in the car. And we're just doing and acting and moving and practicing with everything that's coming. And so there's this question: is this how devotion relates to Mahamudra? Devotion leads to this experience of Mahamudra because we're not so like small, right? Like when I'll give it like so. I'm not going to give too much of this away, but one of the things that kind of came out of like my retreat was like, oh, maybe I should have another job, do something different, and so I actually so I've been like thinking about it and looking very like loosely, not a lot of effort, and all of a sudden something came up and I like applied for the job, and then the next day somebody I know told me that somebody with 1,000% better qualifications applied for the job, and I felt tiny. I felt, oh man, why did I even get my hopes up, etc. And I texted a mentor, and she was like, why are you selling yourself short? And gave me these 7 really beautiful bullet points as to why I might be the better candidate. And it's not that she's right or anything, but it was that experience of direct relationship with this mentor, somebody I look up to, somebody who I respect, somebody who I know is looking out for my best interest, right, and who wants the best thing for me, and is supportive and has been supportive, right? So like a teacher, right? And her displaying that for me opened up my experience to like, oh yeah, that's right. Before I had previously fallen into this hole, and so that's what devotion really is that's the importance of it. Is it kind of shifts perspective, away from this myopic sense of smallness, brokenness, disconnectedness to the world, disconnectedness to ourselves, and brings us right back into this much more dynamic, you could say authentic relationship with everything that's happening. Yeah, and so, so Sarah's point about, using practice as a way of affecting change, as a drug, for example, is, again, it's better than not doing it, right? And yet, when we begin to kind of step into how these practices help us to step into a sense of authenticity and embodiment in a very profound way, right? And in a way that, like, who cares what it looks like? Like, it's not it's not about like replicating the way a tradition looks, right? It's not about like dressing like a Buddha, or having like a little ushnisha on the top of your head like a Buddha and long ears. It's not about talking like some Buddha, which I don't know what a Buddha talks like. It's about being ourselves, and accepting short temper, accepting judgments, accepting ourselves for who we are. I'm not going to say what I want to do now, right now. It's a secret. I actually don't even know. I'm going to be like my mom, who always says, I don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up. Our living mirrors Mahamudra too. Yeah, yes. Yeah, and we can experience Mahamudra through direct experience with other people. Absolutely. I mean, it's not, it's through directly engaging people, listening, like truly listening, truly supporting, truly showing up, truly being in direct relationship. This is what makes chaplaincy so cool, is that you have the opportunity to be in direct relationship with people, right? Or social work. I mean, it's like this way. Maybe not. Or maybe so. I'm trying to read learning the symbols. Yes. Well, so okay. So Melissa's question is in a discussion regarding language. Everything's running away. Come up with using the term mind. Language is imputation. No, it's hard to move to a state of no imputation. How to do this? Well, you need to break it. You need to break reliance on projecting and break reliance onto form, and break reliance. It's like, those like, nice pithy shirts and buttons that like say smash the state. Right? Instead of smashing the state, smash symbol. Smash idea. Smash concept. Smash reference point. Right? Who cares? Tear things up. Fuck it. Like, these are the ways that we begin to kind of, cut through this stuff. Like, if everything is constantly so holy that you can't touch it, can't criticize it, can't test it, can't examine it, then, like, well, what's the point? Like, then that kind of religion or that kind of practice is the go to church on Sunday kind of practice, and that's it. So did I freeze? Am I back? Oh, well. Oh, I'm back. Yay. Okay. Well, maybe the Dakinis didn't want me to say what I was saying. I was saying some pretty radical things. So I was trying to address Melissa's point about how to live a life without imputation or projection. Oh, some heard it. All right, good. I was saying that you should smash everything, like smash the state, smash words, smash concepts, destroy holiness, and we find this like in some of the tantras, in Guhya Samaya Tantra in particular. There's a lot of language around like killing, right? So kill all this stuff, like fuck it, if everything's got to be golden and shiny, where nothing, like it's just not going to work. Smashing, yeah, killing. These are like mantras, or smash killing. Like you need to be able to take the whole thing apart in order to know how to put it back together. And so there are certain words that we use, like the word love, like, oh, I love that, oh, I love them, oh, I love this, oh, that is fine, right? I kind of know what you're talking about, but do I really know the experience? And so even with these texts, they're highly imperfect, right? Yeah, self-destroying. Ultimately, as Buddhists, I think we need to self-destroy, or we definitely need to self-destroy, identity and point of reference. And that could be hard because we put so much time and energy into this persona, into the way we look, into the way we sound, into the way we appear, into the impact we want to have, and that too at some point needs to be let go of. It's not that we never comb our hair or whatever, but shoot, you don't need to comb your hair, or if you want to comb your hair, it doesn't really matter. Like, there's a lot of the sanctity, holiness of this stuff that just needs to be let go of. I do want to try and stay on point a little bit, so I'm going to move on. So, in short, the pointing out of non-dual wisdom, free of all dualistic confusion, simplicity, great bliss, emptiness, endowed with all the supreme aspects, that which is known as Mahamudra, has been recognized. It hovers above those who are devoted. It circles those who supplicate with intense longing. It descends into those whom blessings have entered. Not hidden and naturally present, it exists within you, but was not recognized before. Now that the pointing out has been recognized, you have arrived at ground Mahamudra, seen the nature of path Mahamudra, and understood fruition Mahamudra. Rejoice in that. It is important that you continually and wholeheartedly make it the focus of your practice. Here, the pointing out instructions of the ways of looking have been placed together separately, so this is just instruction for the teacher. But so, practice this. And I would urge folks to go ahead and buy the text. And you can do that through the Nalanda Translation Committee. That's the translation I'm using. There are some translations or teachings by Trungpa Rinpoche, but they don't usually have the whole root text. And I like to kind of engage with the root text and not know so much about what other people have to say. And if somebody could put the link in, that would be awesome for the Nalanda Translation Committee. Maybe even a link directly to the text. Yeah, definitely stop taking yourself so seriously. So now the conclusion piece, and I want to be able to kind of hit some of these points. And I'm going to have to kind of end slightly on time because I've got to pick up, oh, thank you, Sarah. Pick up my kids from the bus stop. So the conclusion. So there are 3 sections of this conclusion. So the first is called Enhancing the Practice and Dispelling Hindrances. So this will be useful. The contemplations on the difficulty of finding a free and well-favored situation up through bodhicitta and so on should be regarded as Mahamudra. Right? So this contemplation of the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma. As well, your entire practice of upati and sampanakrama should be endowed with awareness. Right? So if you're doing creation stage or completion stage practices, visualizing yourself as a deity, or the kind of completion stage yogas, you should blend the awareness of Mahamudra into that. Recognizing your nature continually through the 4 activities, mix them with Mahamudra. So this is really important. Like, as you move through your day, right, blend Mahamudra directly into everything. Okay? There's nothing off limits. There are no private moments where you can't apply Mahamudra. Like, Mahamudra should be applied to everything. And all you're doing, right, in that is resting into direct experience with open, spacious awareness. Right? Cutting the kind of root of discursiveness and resting in how everything arises in that moment. So it could be cooking, it could be picking up the kids, it could be in an argument with somebody you live with, it could be waiting for people to stop using a tile saw. It could be walking through jails. It could be, blessing dead bodies. It could be, driving for long periods of time. It could be COVID. You can say that I gave the transmission. They'll accept that. And Larry, the executive director of that translation committee, knows me. So this is very, very important. And so here, he continues by saying, practice not parted. Language is a little weird. Practice not parted from the inseparability of shamatha and vipassana, uncontrived simplicity. So practice, with the focus of shamatha and the vastness of vipassana merged together with this kind of very natural, ordinary simplicity. Relying on that throughout, everything you do is with that will enhance your practice. So this is like, quote unquote, practicing off the cushion. In addition, fixation on accepting and rejecting virtuous and non-virtuous actions through the 3 times do not exist, thinking I will attain enlightenment at this time, right? So, like even Tibetans back then were kind of obsessed with that. Though one's mind is primordially endowed with the 5 wisdoms, taking it to be ordinary, not relying primarily on the wisdom that arises from meditation, but hoping to be liberated by the wisdom of hearing and contemplating, abandon these perverted thoughts concerning objects, time, essence, nature, and wisdom. So I'm going to repeat that. Abandon these perverted thoughts concerning objects, concerning time, concerning essence, concerning nature, and concerning wisdom. Right? So what does that mean? I love it. Perverted thoughts around time is that Mahamudra is going to come like when I'm 70, because I suck right now. I'm a shitty meditator. I'm a shitty person. Only if I grind myself to dust will I become enlightened. Like, that's bullshit. Like, that should be smashed. Perverted thoughts around essence. The essence of mind is so far away. I need to slowly reel it in because I'm terrible. Like, destroy that. Wisdom. Oh, wisdom needs to very painfully be blended into, my experience of life, right? No, your mind is free right now. Smash that. Perverted thoughts around objects, like, these external objects, like I should buy a statue of the Buddha and put my head to it and then walk around it for 1,000 years, and only then will true devotion arise within me. Smash that. Mind is true devotion. Experience is true devotion. Stepping in dog shit is true devotion. Like, stop. Stop all the insanity. Like, stop the madness. Oh, stop it. In addition, fixation. Oh, wait, that's the one I just did. Okay. Adopt the points of body. Right. So again, here we do it in our modified way. Right. Adopt the points of body. So whatever feels good. It's lying down, sitting. And certain texts. Not in the Mahamudra tradition, but in the Dzogchen tradition, we'll get into kind of all sorts of different asanas, you can adopt. But, so adopt the points of body. So let's, kind of rest however you will, we can say. Resting and looking at the nature of the still mind when it's still, and the moving mind when it's moving. Clearing fatigue when the synchronization of your samadhi and body posture becomes sloppy. Right? So clearing fatigue when the synchronization of your samadhi and body posture has become sloppy. So it's not that your body posture has become sloppy or your samadhi has become sloppy. It's that we've made a whole lot of stress over body and samadhi experience. Right? So if you're going to lay on the ground like a corpse and experience samadhi, do that. If you're going to recline like a royal person, recline and experience samadhi that way. If you want to be on your side, like somebody practicing dream yoga, and do that, then do that. If you want to make up your own asana, then do that, right? But don't let this lack of calibration happen because you think that one is not good, right? Let's see. And abandoning fixation with attachment or aversion on any experience or realization, good or bad. Right? Smash good or bad. You should take good and bad, put it in a bucket, throw it out the window, let a truck hit it until it's a sloppy mess, light it on fire, and just say no to good and bad. Yeah, be like a child. Yes. That's right. Let's see. The first of these is the skill of beginning. The second is a skill in suspending. And the last is the skill of sustaining the experience. So train in these 3 skills. In addition, if there is a fixation on bliss, luminosity, or non-thought, in short, on any experience or realization whatsoever, it is straying. It is a straying that leads to disaster. So do not fixate. Do not fixate on like, oh, like everything feels incredible. Don't fixate. Experience it, but don't fixate. And so I'm going to throw this back to Melissa. Like, so how to experience, things without imputation or projection. And then we can go even further, like fixation, right? How to be able to experience without leaving little fingerprints on our experiences because we're holding on, right? So whatever it is, if it's bliss, luminosity, non-thought, whatever we begin to cling to, can we turn our practice around so that we're able to experience what's happening without holding on tightly, right? So that we avoid the disaster created by this. And then he says, accordingly, abandon attachment and aversion. And so then he goes on to say, through such reasonings as neither one nor many, it has been resolved that all dharmas have become empty of their own nature, that mind-made emptiness is straying from emptiness in regard to nature. Mind-made emptiness is straying from emptiness. Take your books and burn them. Take your Madhyamaka texts and use them as toilet paper. Like mind-made emptiness, like this philosophical speculation. I had some really good friends who, we talk about Mahamudra and they would get all into the philosophy part of it, and instantly my eyes would glaze over. I would become very sleepy and want to leave the room. And that's probably because I'm not that smart. But the larger point is that, that is useless. That's like, it's just useless. It's not worth your time. Yeah. So, okay. Taking emptiness as an antidote and klesha as something to abandon, one does not realize that everything is emptiness. That is straying from emptiness in regard to antidote. So this gets back to kind of Sarah's point of using Dharma practice as an antidote, using it as a drug, using it as a thing to enhance or to transform or to save this experience that just sucks, right? My experience of klesha is, maybe in this moment the experience of anger. And so I'm like, oh, well, anger is essentially empty. Like, shut up. Like, that's not what it's about. Leave that alone. And it strays from emptiness in regard to antidote. Not realizing the entire path, right, which is ground, path, and fruition, is a path of enlightenment. One regards only emptiness, not the other paths, as useful, and does not think of the aspect of upaya, right, or activity, skillful means. That is straying from emptiness in regard to the path, right? So don't preference emptiness. Like, don't be some kind of person with a PhD who likes Zen. Sorry. Don't be that person. Be the person who also will roll your sleeves up and be a social worker. Skillful means, who will be a chaplain, who will, be a parent, who will go out and benefit people, right? Who will get their hands dirty in life, right? Don't just, all I do is emptiness. Like, that sounds really terribly boring, and like, snooty and, oh, sorry about that. Lacking experience, but nevertheless purifying his emptiness by means of the Svabhava mantra. And so on, one labels everything as emptiness and disregards karma and its results. This is straying from emptiness in regards to labeling. So the Svavava mantra is Om Sabhava Shuddha Dharma Sabhava Shuddha Svava. Om Sabhava Shuddha Dharma Sabhava Shuddha Ham, which is basically translates to everything is everything is the essence of emptiness, and so am I, right? And so that mantra, like we could go around. This point is we could put that mantra like what's that artist who puts his sticker of, I think he's like BME. Is that his kind of, it's not really a tag because it's not graffiti, but it's just BME, and he's done it all over the world, right? So we can put these stickers like everything is emptiness and so am I on everything, right? Like, what does that do, right? So this labeling, straying from emptiness in regard to labeling, getting into an argument with someone and being like, yeah, it's just emptiness, like that's there you go, thank you. So those four strayings should be abandoned. For beginners, those mind-made emptinesses can be useful, right? So there's this point. So the mantra, Om Sabhava Shuddha Dharma Sabhava Shuddha Hum, is useful, right? And that's why it's basically at the beginning of every single text. But then as we begin to realize the nature of mind, that becomes such a weird contrivance, just almost unnecessary, like more effort than it's worth. So it's important, though, to recognize when these reliances become important, right? So, mind-made emptiness is, study. That can be important, especially in the beginning. Emptiness is an antidote to klesha. Remembering that this overwhelming, klesha experience is ultimately empty. Let me not go down that path. In the beginning, it is important, right? Preferencing emptiness over upaya because, in the beginning, we're not so good at skillful means is important in the beginning. Being reassured by this Om Sabhava Shuddha Dharma Sabhava Shuddha Dharma Sabhava Shuddha Hum is important. It's a reminder of emptiness, right? So, and then we outgrow it. And I was talking to somebody before this. It's like, outgrowing a shoe. Like, once you've outgrown the shoe, you can't put it back on. You can try to be a really cool shoe that you wish you didn't outgrow, but you did. And, you're stuck where you are. You outgrew all of these things. You outgrew these four strings. So why even say it? Because in the beginning, it can be helpful to be be reminded of the fact that everything is empty, and so are you, especially you people. Sometimes thoughts, kleshas, and so on arise properly as meditation, but sometimes thoughts are uncontrollably wild and have a strong flow of movement, which brings discouragement. That is thoughts arising as an enemy. By regarding them as friends and resting within that without a fixation, they will be dispelled. Right? So don't run away from thoughts when they're coming or kleshas. Sit with them and learn how to experience them directly, and everything will settle. Kleshas arise as enemies. Seeing all dharmas to be non-existent, one disregards the cause and effect of karma, which is emptiness arising as an enemy. One becomes attached to the vivid visual display of a variety of appearance. One becomes easy with that. As one becomes easy with that, appearances arise as an enemy. One who has given rise to good qualities to some extent sees others who have not developed the good qualities of faith, compassion, and emptiness, and feels compassion for them, thinking, I should benefit these beings. While not accomplished, one casts aside one's practice and enters into trying to be helpful. That is compassion arising as an enemy. Not having resolved the view, one thinks, I want to be omniscient. and pursues more minor studies such as grammar, logic, and the arts, casting aside samadhi. That is thought concerning cause and effect arising as an enemy. When any of these 5 thoughts arises, look at its very nature and rest there without accepting or rejecting, affirming or negating. It will be dispelled. No, it's not usually 2 hours long. I'm being sloppy. Sorry, Lorena. I'm not going to finish this. Oh well. I will break because it's an hour and a half. I'll finish this portion. Similarly, whether it be a fault of meditation, such as the 3 faults of dullness, wildness, and sunkenness, or the like, an illness or a dun, or a hindrance to samadhi, such as a heightened obstacle, sickness, pain, special experience and realization, or the like, whatever arises, abandon attachment and aversion and look at its very nature. Let it rest naturally, and it will be pacified in its own accord. I'll keep going if I can. And you can stay if you can, or go if you need. It's all the same. It's being recorded. Or you can look into the arising, dwelling, and going, as well as the color, shape, and so forth of the thoughts, the color, shape, and so forth of the illness, the color, the shape, and so forth of the hindrances, and so on. Or you can do sending and taking, Tong Len, in regard to illness. Or you can regard the arising of various manifestations, illness and pain, etc., as the Nirmanakaya. Insight into them as the Sambhogakaya, and their emptiness as the Svabhavikaya, and the inseparability of those 3 as the Dharmakaya. Right? So this is a little helpful, different ways of looking at these kind of obstacles. That was the combined dispelling hindrances and enhancing the practice. There are many other ways to dispel obstructions and enhance practice, but the above is enough. I like that too, because he's like, your discursive mind will send you down a rabbit hole looking for every single possible remedy. Just use these, because we can keep going. So then it goes on to the next section, which is the way that virtues arise and the way that, of proceeding along the path. Smash the love, Lorena. And lovey smash to you. When one gets to the heart of the preliminaries, by contemplating the difficulties of obtaining free and well-favored situation and impermanence, one's mind will turn away from this life, right? By the all of our attachments to this life. By contemplating karma and its results, trust in them will arise, and one will guard one's action, even at the cost of one's own life, right? Which means don't, thank you. We need to keep karma in mind all the time. We can think, I practice Mahamudra, I don't need to, think about karma, I'm going to go kill that person. And then you end up in jail, or some other place. It's not so easy to practice in most places. Through contemplating the faults of samsara and discouragement with samsara will arise, and one will develop renunciation and a wish to attain enlightenment. By meditating on loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, one will be free from desiring one's own happiness, especially at the expense of others, and accomplish only the benefit of others. By the 100 syllables of Vajrasattva's mantra, the signs of purification of evil deeds and obscurations will occur in reality, visions, and in dreams, and so on. And the experience and realization will arise. By the mandala offering, body and mind become blissful, and one will have few desires, be content, and attain limitless merit Through Guru Yoga, devotion will blaze, and Samadhi blessings and experience and realization will arise effortlessly. I'm probably going to have to go in 5 minutes or so I'm just going to read through this. And we can kind of, for those who study with me one-on-one, we can kind of go over these things, when we meet next. Through shamatha, the body will be thoroughly trained. One will be endowed with the higher perceptions and miraculous powers, have little craving for food and clothing, be radiant, and so on. The qualities are limitless. So at this point might sound crazy, like you won't desire food, but actually this happened to me in my retreat where after a certain point, food didn't feel necessary so much. Obviously I had to eat, but it was just, it was a formality. The specifics of these things kind of melt away because we're very content, right? The contentment from shamatha is this experience of contentment born of great stability and quiescence. So through vipassana, proceeding through the 10 bhumis and 5 paths, one will arrive at the realization of non-meditation. And so vipassana develops sometimes slowly, sometimes very quickly into this experience of non-meditation. And in the experience of non-meditation, there is no object to be meditated on. One is just constantly aware of everything that's arising in the moment. And so you could be, using a tile saw in the heat, right? And that becomes, the experience of awareness. You could be right on the cusp of a meeting, and that could be, the experience of awareness. As for the way of proceeding along the path, one proceeds through one-pointedness, simplicity, one taste, and non-meditation. So these are the 4 yogas of Mahamudra. Right? So these 4 kind of stages of the way Mahamudra develops. One-pointedness is, this kind of, direct singularity of experience. Simplicity is that the complexity, right? All this like philosophical stuff, and just melts away, and we're able to directly experience everything without all of that, the heat and the friction, right? One taste, everything is the same. Everything is of the same nature, but it authentically experienced that way, right? So the authentic experience of one taste arises. And then non-meditation, and that's this complete freedom from meditation, freedom from sitting down to meditate, right? Everything that arises becomes meditation. Each divided into lesser, medium, and greater stages. So, 1, as mind gains some stability, a lot of stability, or a great deal of stability in shamatha, one proceeds along the path of lesser, medium, and greater one-pointedness. Okay, see you, Lorena. 2, as one's experience of that is stabilized, one realizes that all dharmas are simplicity. Right? Everything comes back to this. One's meditation, not greatly depending on holding one's mindfulness, simplicity arises a little, a lot, or a great deal, with no stability, some stability, or a lot of stability. Based on that, one proceeds along the path of lesser, medium, or greater simplicity. 3rd, there is some realization that the multiplicity of all dharmas is of one taste. A lot of realization and a great deal of realization, which leads to no stability, some stability, and a great deal of stability in one's purification of previous attachments to emptiness. Based on that, one proceeds through lesser, medium, or greater one taste. 4, there is some realization of being free from an object of meditation and a meditator. A lot of realization and a great deal of realization, which leads to no stability, some stability, and a great deal of stability in being free even from what was previously true. bliss being in reference to appearances, and in post-meditation, holding one's mindfulness and being illusory appearance, bliss being in reference to appearances, and in post-meditation, holding one's mindfulness and there being illusory appearances. Based on that, one travels through lesser, medium, and greater non-meditation. By the Vajra-like samadhi, the two obscurations along with the habitual patterns are abandoned, and one travels to the state of Buddhahood. Okay, I think I can do this. The way of realizing the fruition. By meditating in that way, one travels the path from one-pointedness up to the greater non-meditation. Having attained complete enlightenment until samsara is empty, one will continually benefit sentient beings by means of the four karmas and be spontaneously accomplished as a master of the pervasive and permanent Buddha activity that establishes all in the path that ripens and frees. Therefore, taking just this to heart, if you do not forsake your practice, it is certain that you will become enlightened in one lifetime and in one body. Therefore, I've written this practice manual which combines into practice sessions brief notes on the stages of practice from the famed co-emergent Mahamudra of the Kamsang tradition. May the gurus and hosts of dakinis please forgive anything that is contradictory or confused here. I dedicate whatever virtue exists to a cause for all beings as limitless as space to realize Mahamudra in one lifetime spontaneously accomplish the two benefits. Based on the encouragement of one highly esteemed in the two traditions, Kugungpa Nangso Chotrinpa, a heart son of the glorious Guru, who said that it was needed, I, Vajrashvara, composed this session manual at Kurap Tashigang. May it be propagated. May glorious auspiciousness blaze, and may experience and realization blaze. May the ornament of the flourishing of teachings. May they ornament the flourishing of teachings. Subham astu sarva jatkam idam. Yes, Max, this is a good point. So that's that. I am going to have to go, and I apologize for leaving quickly, but I do have to pick up my kids. I will not be teaching or leading anything else for Bhumi Sparsha in August, just because I need to attend to some things. But stay aware, and everything in September will, happen. So may you all be well. May you all take care. May your practice be deep. Thank you.